Back in the 1800s, chemists and scientists called compounds created by organisms organic, believing that they were distinctly different from compounds in non-living things. They called these organic compounds. Since we've been able to create these organic compounds in a lab, the term means something very different today. Organic compounds refer to all compounds that contain bonds between carbon atoms or between carbon atoms and other atoms. So go get some organic compounds in the form of paper and pencil, or maybe an inorganic pen, and get your paper ready. Remember, wide right, skinny left. See you on the next slide. If you remember from the Skittles lab, carbon has an atomic number of 6. That means it has 6 protons and 6 electrons. And I see the protons here with little plus sign, little blue guys. A couple of them are hiding, but there are 6 because we know carbon is a balanced atom and we have to have protons equals electrons. And if you remember from the Skittles lab, the first orbit can hold 2 electrons and the second orbit can hold up to 8. Well, carbon's atomic number is 6, so it has 4 valence electrons. It has 4 electrons in that outer shell. This arrangement allows carbon to make some very, very strong covalent bonds with lots and lots of other elements, specifically hydrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, sulfur, and nitrogen. These bonds can be single, double, or even triple covalent bonds. More importantly, it can bond to other carbons, making long chains and sometimes even rings. No other element can do as much as carbon. It's pretty amazing. Many of the organic compounds in living cells are so large that they're known as macromolecules. Macro is a prefix that means large. So macromolecules are huge, big. Okay? Actually, these macromolecules are formed in a unique process called polymerization, or the making of a polymer. So let's talk about that for a little bit. Small units called monomers combine in this process to form polymers. Monomers can be identical like the links on a watch, or they can be different like the beads in a necklace. And if you look at the 3 pictures here, in the top one you see the monomer is the little blue bow tie and the red triangle, and the polymer is a link of those. We see in the beads, the beaded necklace, we see the same pattern over and over again. So the one that makes the pattern would be the monomer. There are 4 groups of macromolecules that we call carbon compounds. So let's take a look at those. Carbohydrates are probably the most familiar to you. Carbohydrates are mainly used for structural purposes in plants and animals with an exoskeleton, or for energy in most animals. Carbon compounds are made from carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen in a very specific 1:1 ratio, like the glucose that's made during photosynthesis. C6H12O6 is a 1:1 ratio. Many carbons have structural use as well as energy source. Starches are the polymer made up of a chain of simple sugars, the monomer. So we see some pasta here. Pasta is made up of sugars all joined together to be one big long chain, which we now call a starch. There are 2 types of sugars. Monosaccharides are the simple sugars, and polysaccharides are the long sugar chains. Usually excess sugar is stored as a polysaccharide called glycogen. Here we see a carbohydrate called chitin. Chitin is found in the exoskeleton of the cicadas at the top of the picture here. This carbohydrate is a polymer made from a sugar monomer. The sugar monomer is shown in the blue ring, and if you look, it repeats itself over and over and over again. So carbohydrates, for us, They are energy source, but for animals with an exoskeleton and for plants, very important structural uses. Lipids are another group of carbon compounds. And you might hear these talked about in commercials or when people are talking about healthy fats and non-healthy fats. Lipids are made mostly of carbon and hydrogen with some oxygen. Usually it's a glycerol molecule combined with a fatty acid. Lipids, or fats, are hydrophobic. That means they are not soluble in water. So while they're a source of energy, they are harder to break down than a carbohydrate. Lipids also form parts of cell membranes and other structures. The waterproof qualities make it very, very important in honeycombs, and it's important for ducks and other water birds, and it's also an important part of exoskeletons for the cicada that we just saw. Now, you have probably heard about saturated and unsaturated fats. Those are the two kinds of lipids. Saturated fats have all single bonds, okay, all single, all the way around. Unsaturated fats have at least one double carbon bond. So if you look at the picture here, is this saturated or unsaturated? I'll give you a clue. Look at the red and green circles. One carbon compound that is very important to bodybuilders is protein. Protein is made of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. It contains a monomer called an amino acid. So the protein is the polymer. The monomer that makes it up is the amino acid. Proteins are the most diverse of all carbon compounds. They have about 20 different amino acids, so they can combine in a lot of different ways. They function to do a lot of different things. They form bone and muscle. They are used for cellular transport. They fight diseases. And as we're going to see in the next section, they control the rate of reactions in living things. So pretty versatile group there, proteins. Lastly, we come to the nucleic acids, named for their discovery within the nucleus. They contain carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and nitrogen. And they're seen here in the green and yellow rings. Nucleotides are the monomers that make up the polymer that's a nucleic acid. And there are 4 nucleic acids: adenine, cytosine, thymine, and guanine. Later on, when you take biology or anatomy, you'll learn more about those 4. But they combine in some very, very unique ways to make up DNA and RNA. And a lot of you have always asked what the difference is between RNA and DNA. It's real simple. DNA stores genetic information, whereas RNA transmits that genetic information. That's all you really need to know right now for us. So, what is next? Well, you've already written your notes. So, go back and summarize, tell me what you learned in this section, and write your questions. Remember, 3 level 1 questions, 2 level 2 questions, and 1 level 3 question. Get with a study buddy to help think of questions. Come up with some good ones. Remember, avoid those yes/no questions. Okay? And then bring your notes to class. In about 3 class periods, I think we're going to be using them. So you got a little bit of time there. Okay? See you guys in class.